Dorsey Jackson Global.
I create.
My name is Connor Jefferson, and I used to be a swimmer. I lived in a small town, and for those of you who live in small towns, you know there's really nothing much to do. So 14 years ago, when a town pool opened and a coach started a swimming club, it brought a bright change to the town. At first, people didn't pay much attention to it, as things got boring really fast. But with time, the team started growing, and eventually, one of our best swimmers made it to the Olympics. After the games that year, our swimmer brought back a silver medal, and the whole town couldn't stop talking about it. From that moment on, swimming became a huge part of our town as we formed numerous inter-house teams and competitions. The whole team would normally come to watch the inter-house competitions, and after the games, the standout swimmer would be chosen to represent us in the Olympic trials. As the affinity for swimming grew in our little town, so did my love for it. I started practicing every day to participate in the games, and I was eventually put on one of the town's best teams. We were called the Silver Dolphins, and we were the pride of the town. We always led the board in every game we participated in, and the Olympic swimmer was always picked from our team. I loved every single one of my teammates. They were like brothers to me, as I had known most of them since we were kids, and every year when the swimming game started, we always carried out what we called harmless rituals on a man called Edgar Scott. He was the janitor or cleaner of the town pool, and we always messed with him by carrying out these little pranks like stealing and hiding his cleaning tools, tracking dirt on the floor he just cleaned, and taking the keys to his office. Looking back on it now, it was a pretty rude thing to do, but it became like a ritual that our team had to carry out every year, and we made sure they were always harmless. Mr. Edgar also never seemed to mind. He was a quiet guy who had been at the pool since it opened, and I didn't think he cared about the pranks we carried out, as he never apprehended us for what we did. So we always looked forward to doing it every coming year. Now, while I loved the swimming competitions, my teammates and the pranks, in recent years, the swimming games had started carrying a bad stigma in the town because about 5 years ago, a morbid incident started happening in our little town, as a reoccurring missing person case was always open every time the swimming season started. Over the years, more than 15 boys had mysteriously disappeared, and while there was no concrete reason to associate the missing persons with the games, the strange thing was, each and every one of those boys who disappeared was on the swimming team, and they had all gone missing during the reoccurring swimming seasons. Being a small town, losses like this were felt throughout the community. The town's cops tried their best to find out why the boys were going missing, but they always ended up with dead ends, as they believed someone outside of the town with an unknown motive was coming to kidnap the boys during the swimming season. But with no ransom calls, those theories were never proven. Some townspeople believed the boys were running away, but that theory was also thrown out, as it didn't match most of the victims' characters or personalities. The cops did everything they could, but with no bodies to bury or closure, the grieving families started to call for the swimming games to stop, as they believed it was the cause of their missing children. But by that time, the games had become such an integral part of our town and our lives that it wasn't approved. Although numerous security measures were taken during the swimming season, as people coming into town during this time were always questioned and checked, and security guards were positioned at the town pool and assigned to watch over the contestants. As swimmers, we always had a bit of fear during this season, as we knew any one of us could be next, but our passion far outmatched our fear, and it never stopped us from participating in the games. It was the 11th of October 2013 when it happened. I was practicing late that night, so not many people were there. When I was done with practice, I took a shower in the public bathroom at the town pool building. Normally, everyone on the team always took showers together after the swimming practice or games. But since I decided to practice late, I was the only one in the public bathroom that night. I started my shower and everything was going fine, till I started hearing the strangest noises. I was the only one there, so I was a bit confused as to where the noise was coming from. I turned off the shower to listen a bit better, and that's when I realized the sounds were coming from the drain. I could tell it was clogged, and before I could do anything, it started releasing the contents that clogged it. At first, I was disgusted as the massive hair clumps and excessive soap lumps began to resurface. But within seconds, my disgust turned to fear as I froze at the sight of something truly morbid. There was no mistaking it. Right there in the middle of the hair clumps, the soap clumps, and the rest of the gunk that clogged the drain was a human finger. It was rotten, but I knew exactly what I was looking at. So I screamed and ran out of the public bathroom. I ran all the way to the pool area before I saw my now bewildered coach staring at me. Apparently, he had come to pick up some things when he heard me scream, and he asked me what was wrong. I tried to find the words to speak, but I couldn't. I eventually managed to stutter, There's a human finger in the bathroom." Shocked at my statement, he immediately said, "Show me." So I quickly took him to the public bathroom. When he got there, he asked me, "Where is it?" And as I looked around the bathroom floor, I realized that it wasn't there anymore. My coach, who now had a perplexed look on his face, looked at me and said, "Are you sure it was a human finger you saw? I mean, all I'm seeing here is a drain that's clogged. Maybe you mistook it for one of those hair clumps." Confused, I started to say, "No, it was a human finger. I saw it. The drain clogged up and it came out with the rest of the gunk on the floor, and it was right there in the middle of all of it. I know what I saw, Coach. Believe me." My coach, who was now looking at me like I was a crazy person, took a deep breath as he said, "Look, Connor, I know you saw something, but I'm sure it wasn't a finger. I know the swimming season is here again, and maybe all the tension from the games, in addition to the fear of the reoccurring strange missing person cases, is getting to you. So you may be seeing things, and if that's the case, I really think you should take a break." When he was done talking, I had nothing else to say, as I knew if I kept defending myself, I would have looked crazier than I already did. I stopped swimming for a while after that, as what I saw that night became an obsession for me. During the weeks that followed the incident, I always sat on the bench during practice, and the people around me started getting worried about my mental health. But deep down, I knew I didn't hallucinate or conjure it up, because to me, that human finger was as real as everyone around me. One particular afternoon, I was sitting on the bench at practice as the other swimmers, when the janitor, Mr. Edgar, came up to me. He sat down beside me and asked, "How are you doing, champ?" I was a bit stunned at first, as I had known him my whole life, but I had never actually spoken to him. But I answered with, "I saw something morbid in the public bathroom and no one believes me. Everyone just thinks I'm crazy." Mr. Edgar then looked at me with a smile and said, "I believe you." Shocked, I replied, "You do?" He then said, "Of course I do. Only God knows what has been flushed down toilets or drainages in these days and age. So it's not that far-fetched. Trust me, I'm a janitor, so I've seen some shit." I found myself smiling as he spoke, because for the first time since the incident, someone actually believed me. Mr. Edgar then continued with, "I've seen how this incident is getting to you, so I decided to talk to you about it today. You're so upset that you aren't swimming anymore. And that's sad, because you're one of the best swimmers, and we really need you to make the town proud." I thanked him for the compliment as he continued with, "As I said earlier, Connor, I believe you saw something that night. I mean, maybe there's a crazed mafia boss who cuts fingers off in a nearby town. Maybe it was a weirdly shaped soap that looked like a finger. Or maybe it was a radioactive worm that the government flushed down the pipe. You know you can't trust those guys." I laughed at his jokes as he finished his statement with, "But the point is, don't let this get you down, okay? And if you ever need to talk, I'm here for you." I smiled as I said, "Thank you for your words, Mr. Edgar. I'm glad we talked. To be honest, I thought you hated us because all the pranks we pulled on you." Mr. Edgar then laughed and said, "I could never hate you boys. You're the pride of our town. Besides, it's just harmless fun, and recently, I've actually started looking forward to what you boys come up with next year." We both laughed at his last statement, and we continued to talk into the afternoon. After my discussion with Mr. Edgar, I decided to stop obsessing over what happened that night. I started swimming again, and things were going great. I even started my late-night practices again to get even better. One night, after a long day of practice, I went to take my usual after-swim shower. It took a while this time, but just like that night, the drain started making noises again. I wanted to ignore it as I didn't want to experience another traumatizing incident, but as much as I tried, I couldn't. I told myself that this was my chance to prove to everyone that I was right. So I acted on my impulsive thoughts as I decided to manually clog the drain. I stuffed huge wads of tissue rolls and any other thick material I could find into the drain while keeping the shower running at full force. It was disgusting work, but I did it anyway, as if my plan worked, I could prove I wasn't lying. It didn't take long before the drain started groaning loudly, and within minutes, it expelled everything from its depths like a geyser. As I looked around the now filthy public bathroom, I had no words. For starters, the drain cover had popped during the small explosion, and all the things that were clogging it were now gushing out. The first thing I noticed were the small clumps that looked like shredded meat, but as I looked around, the assortment of human fingers, toes, and teeth told me everything I needed to know. The sight was so ghastly that I didn't feel the vomit till it was gushing out of my throat. I was scared shitless at the morbid scene, but I knew there was enough proof here to prove I was telling the truth, so I ran to get someone. The first person I saw was Mr. Edgar. He had heard the explosion and came to see what happened, so I screamed, "Call the cops, Mr. Edgar! There's human body parts gushing out of the public bathroom's drain!" But instead of rushing for his phone, he looked at me calmly and said, "I'm sorry, Connor, but I can't do that." Shocked, I screamed, "Why? Didn't you hear me? There are human body parts. We need to call the cops." Mr. Edgar then looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Why? Well, because I put them there." His words made me freeze as I slowly asked, "What did you just say?" He then replied with, "You heard me. Those body parts belong to the town's 15 missing boys. I cut them up and flushed them down the drain." I don't really have words to explain how I felt as he said those words, but I can never forget the feelings as it was a mixture of true horror and fear. I remember looking at him in shock as I said, "Jesus, did you do this because we pranked you?" Mr. Edgar then calmly replied me with, No, Connor. I told you the truth that day. I bore no ill towards you boys. But look at it like this. The same way you enjoy those silly pranks is the same way I enjoyed killing and shredding those boys. It's like a hobby of sorts." As Mr. Edgar spoke, I finally realized what it meant to be a psychopath. I watched in horror as he talked about the brutal and morbid murder of 15 people like it was a normal, everyday thing. He even likened the ghastly act to that of a hobby. When he was done, Mr. Edgar then looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Connor. It's such a small town, so I don't really have many options when it comes to disposing of the bodies after having my fun. But I have to clean the mess you made, and to do that, I also have to end you." I didn't fully register what he said, and before I could do anything, I saw him lunge toward me with a huge knife. Instinctively, I raised my hand to defend myself from the blow, and the knife went straight through my palm. The pain I felt was unbearable, but I didn't stop to scream, as I knew if I stopped defending myself for a second, I was going to die. Till today, I don't know where the strength came from, but I managed to keep fighting and pushing back his attacks. We struggled as we tried to take each other to the ground. Fighting back with a knife lodged in my hand sent searing pain through my whole body. I was losing a lot of blood, and the world started getting dark around me. But I kept fighting and hoping that I'd come out of this brawl alive. Luckily for me, Mr. Edgar lost his footing on the wet floor and he slipped. I immediately took the opportunity as I managed to land a good kick on his torso. The force sent him flying back and he hit his head on the hard floor. As he lay there motionless, I thought I had killed him. As my mind started to unravel, I realized I had reached my limit and I couldn't take it anymore. But my legs started running. I ran out of the building, screaming at the passerbys to call the cops, and within minutes, the building was surrounded. The officers asked me what happened, so I told them I was attacked by the town's pool janitor, Edgar. When I was done, they all quickly rushed into the building to find him, but when they came out, they said no one was there. I tried to respond, but I had lost a lot of blood. I saw the world get darker as I fell to my knees and passed out. I woke up 2 days later in the hospital, surrounded by my family. It didn't take long before the cops showed up to ask me more questions about what happened, so I retold them everything that happened in great detail, and by the week's end, everything was revealed. I found out that the human remains that I made come out of the drain were still there when the cops searched the building. The town's pool was then closed as a thorough investigation of the drainage pipes was carried out. The cops, in addition to the forensics, spent weeks retrieving the numerous body parts of the 15 victims. The body parts of the victims were already decayed, scattered, and mixed together, so it was hard to tell who was who, and the grieving families still didn't have any bodies to bury. An assortment of bloody butcher knives was found in the back of the town pool's storage unit, where the janitor used to stay. Detectives deduced Edgar Jefferson manually cut off the toes, fingers, and heads of his victims first, as he enjoyed it, before shredding the rest of the body into bits and pieces. Edgar himself was never found, as reports stated he managed to escape before being captured, and he still remains at large to this very day. Even after so many years, this incident still rings fresh in the minds of every single person in our town. The passion for the swimming sport is gone, as no one swims anymore, and the extensive PTSD from the incident made everyone swear to never go near a pool again. Well, everyone except me. I won't lie, it took a couple of years to get the courage back, and while I know I'd never get over the trauma that I experienced that day, I'm not going to let that morbid experience define me. I still want to be a swimmer, and even though it's hard, I'm still going to try, one step at a time.
Narrated by Dorsey Jackson of Dorsey Jackson Global at Compound City. Be sure to like and subscribe.